There have been many obstacles in life, as well as some little victories. The agony of losing my parents when I was young was intense and never really went away. However, I was fortunate to be taken in by the Parkers, an old couple who lived next door. They were the most generous individuals you will ever encounter. Instead of treating me as someone they were assisting, they treated me more like their granddaughter. The only thing that mattered was that we were rich in love, not a lot of money. The Parkers passed away in a vehicle accident right before my 19th birthday, when I was considering going to college. All of a sudden, I was alone once more. They left me a tiny sum of money for their suburban home and school. Although it was a warm, comfortable house with many memories, I didn't like how many reminders of the past there were. In order to purchase a tiny apartment in the city near the institution where I had enrolled to study financial management, I decided to sell it. Having a strategy and making progress felt nice. I put a lot of effort into learning as much as I could about markets and numbers in these challenging but fascinating lectures. I obtained a good job after graduation. I was working hard during the day and doing oak, but the evening seemed different. The city felt oddly lonely despite its bustling population. I met Peter at a friend's party at that time. He didn't care who saw him, he was loud, and he was entertaining. We clicked right away when he crashed into me and spilled my drink because of his infectious enthusiasm. Hey, watch it. I was more shocked than angry when I snapped. I'm sorry, let me compensate you. What did you drink? There was no trace of remorse in Peter's smile. Just beer, I answered, attempting to hide my smile. He yelled above the music, 2 beers coming right up, as he made his way to the temporary bar. That was Peter, plain and uncomplicated, without any drama. We spoke about everything and nothing all night long. We both detested sushi and enjoyed old movies. It was simple to talk to him, and I didn't want to say goodbye when the celebration was over. He proposed 2 years later. He took a ring out of his pocket, but there were no big gestures, just the 2 of us watching TV. He murmured, "Marry me," while clinging to the ring. I was afraid he would break it. Not because it was hilarious, but because the quiet moments, with their exquisite imperfections, were so us. I laughed. "Yes, of course, you big goof," I said. At first, marriage didn't make much of a difference. It felt natural that we were now formally bound together, but otherwise we were still the same people. We made our home in my tiny flat in the city, still near the busy streets, but with a companion to enjoy the quiet times with. For the first time in a long time, the nights didn't feel so lonely, and life felt more complete. Although marriage provided a sense of security, life has a way of keeping you alert. Mr. and Mrs. Scott, Jack's parents, were amazing individuals. They embraced me as a member of their family right away and lived in a comfortable suburban house. I could understand Jack's laid-back disposition. My heart, which was still hurting from losing my own family, was soothed by their warmth. Mrs. Scott would frequently squeeze my hand with such tenderness that it was both reassuring and a bit overpowering. "We're so happy you're part of our family now," she would remark. I would respond, "Thank you, I really appreciate how welcoming you've been," with sincere gratitude. We started going there every weekend. Backyard barbecues and lengthy coffee conversations were commonplace during those times. Simple and honest, life was lovely. Then, however, everything was different. Jack had to go a lengthy business trip. A full year would pass while he was away. The timing couldn't have been worse, yet it was an amazing chance for his career. Mr. Scott's and Mrs. Scott's health quickly deteriorated after Jack departed. Mrs. Scott contacted me one day, her voice worried. "I hate to ask, Laura, but I'm in serious need of your assistance." Her voice was full with sorrow as she said, "Mr. Scott is not doing well." I packed my stuff and went to the suburbs without hesitation. It disturbed me to see Mr. and Mrs. Scott so weak. Once powerful and stable, Mr. Scott now appeared so little, attached to tubes and machinery. I rapidly became accustomed to helping out around the house, cooking, cleaning, and performing other tasks, while Mrs. Scott concentrated on taking care of her husband. I used to sit with them in the evenings and read aloud from Mr. Scott's favorite novels. Before I finished a chapter, he would frequently close his eyes, whispering, "Thank you, Laura." His voice was only a shell of its former glory on the good days. I would gently squeeze his hand and say, "It's my pleasure," really attempting to console him in any small way I could. One quiet afternoon, while I was chopping vegetables for dinner, Mrs. Scott sat down at the kitchen table. She looked older than usual, the weight of everything clearly wearing on her. "Laura, I don't know how to say this, but we're in a bit of a tough spot," she started, nervously wringing her hands. Mr. Scott had always been the one providing for their household, and with him in such poor health, Mrs. Scott was clearly stressed. I put down the knife, giving her my full attention. "We're struggling, honey. I hate to even ask, but would you consider renting out your apartment? It might help us get through this rough patch," she said, looking down, clearly embarrassed. I didn't hesitate for a second. "Of course, Mrs. Scott. I'll take care of it right away," I replied firmly, wanting to ease her burden as much as I could. The apartment rented out quickly, and every month I made sure to send the rental money to Mrs. Scott, along with enough to cover groceries and bills. It wasn't easy. The commute to my job in the city was a nightmare, but I kept telling myself that family sticks together no matter what. "You're a godsend, Laura," Mrs. Scott would say, her voice obvious every time I handed her the money. "It's what family does," I'd respond, though there were nights when I lay in the guest room, listening to the distant sounds of the city, feeling like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. Jack's phone calls were my lifeline. Even though the connection was often bad, hearing his voice kept me going. "How's it going, Joyce? Are you holding up okay?" His concern was always clear, even through the static of a long-distance call. "We're managing. Don't worry about us," I'd say, trying to sound cheerful, not wanting to add to his worries. Life at the Scott's house changed drastically when Lauren, Mrs. Scott's daughter from her first marriage, showed up out of the blue. The whole atmosphere shifted the moment she arrived. She had a presence that felt like a cold wind sneaking in under the door. I didn't know Lauren very well, but Jack had mentioned her a few times, and I had seen enough during her brief, tense visit to know that her relationship with Mr. and Mrs. Scott was strained. My days were already long, juggling work and caring for Mr. and Mrs. Scott. Mr. Scott was getting better, then getting worse again, and Lauren's arrival only added more stress. She moved in like she owned the place, making herself at home without a second thought. One evening, after an especially hard day, Mr. Scott motioned for me to come closer. His voice was weak, a strained whisper. "Laura, you need to watch out for Lauren. She's not a good person," he said, his words making my stomach knot with worry. "I understand, Mr. Scott." "I'll be careful," I promised, though I wasn't exactly sure what I was supposed to be careful about. Mr. Scott's warning didn't take long to make sense. Lauren quickly made her intentions clear. One morning, I found her in the kitchen, her presence dark and cold, like a storm cloud. "Just so we're clear," she said, her tone sharp, "I'm not here to play maid or cook for anyone." She sipped her coffee, eyeing me like I was in her way. I felt like an outsider in her mother's kitchen. Lauren's presence made it clear that I was not welcome, but I tried to stay calm. "Okay, Lauren. I've been taking care of things so far, and I can keep doing it. I said, hoping to keep the peace. Good, because I don't plan on lifting a finger. This is Mom's house, after all, she snapped back, her eyes daring me to do otherwise. From that day on, Lauren made sure everyone felt her presence, and not in a good way. She would order takeout just for herself and her mom, leaving the empty containers on the table for me to clean up. Her attitude wasn't subtle, and it hurt. But I kept quiet because Mr. and Mrs. Scott needed peace. One evening, Mrs. Scott spoke up. "Laura, why don't you sit and eat with us tonight?" There was a rare warmth in her voice, and for a moment, I felt like the old days were back. Before I could answer, Lauren quickly cut in. "Mom, Laura has been busy all day. She probably prefers to eat later." Her words sounded concerned, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome at the table. The days felt heavier as my chores doubled. Lauren's entitlement filled the house, and she often whispered to her mother at night, likely turning her against me. Mrs. Scott, once kind and understanding, began to change. Her smiles became fewer, her words colder. A couple of weeks later, Mr. Scott passed away. The funeral was a somber event, with Jack flying in just in time to say goodbye. It was the first. I noticed a shift. Time we had been together in months, and having him by my side brought a sense of relief. But even amidst the mourning, I noticed a shift in the air at the Scott home. Lauren was on her best behavior, acting polite to everyone with a forced smile. "How's everything been while I've been gone?" she asked me quietly when we had a moment alone after the service. "Fine, everything's been fine," I lied, forcing a smile. I didn't want to add to his grief by telling him about the tension in the house. "Are you sure?" "You look a bit worn out," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. "It's just been busy, you know, helping out here." I reassured him, avoiding his eyes. This wasn't the time to unload everything that had been happening. As soon as Jack left, Lauren dropped the act. The mask of the caring sister was gone, replaced by her usual sneering attitude. The dynamic in the house changed completely. Mrs. Scott, perhaps consumed by her own grief, grew distant and cold toward me. She stopped having conversations with me, only giving commands, and I felt more like a stranger than a part of the family. Lauren took over the house as if she owned it, acting like the lady of the manor. Her reign was marked by complete disregard for anyone's feelings but her own. She started barging into my room without knocking, rummaging through my belongings like she was searching for something valuable. One afternoon, I found her in my room again, and I knew things were only going to get worse. I was out in the garden trying to find some peace when I noticed a box lying among the shrubs. Curious, I opened it and felt my heart sink. Inside were my watches, jewelry, and even some of my underwear. Nearby, several of my dresses were carelessly thrown over a bush. Fury rose inside me as I grabbed my belongings, clutching the box tightly. I stormed inside and found Lauren lounging in the living room, acting like she owned the place. "What the hell, Lauren?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. "You can't just throw my stuff out." Lauren laughed, a cold, harsh sound that echoed through the room. "Live here, please. You're just a guest, and not a welcome one. You should be out in the garden, or better yet, on the street. You're nothing but a useless beggar anyway," she sneered. Her words stung deeply, like pouring salt on a wound. Trembling, I turned to Mrs. Scott, who had just walked into the room. "Mrs. Scott, please tell her she can't treat me like this." "This is supposed to be my home, too," I pleaded, my voice breaking. But Mrs. Scott, once so kind and gentle, looked right through me as if I didn't exist. "This is Lauren's house now," she said coldly. "She's right. Laura, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live." Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. I stood there, clutching the box, my heart breaking. The home I had come to know, the family I thought I had, was falling apart in front of me. Despite everything, I stayed because of a promise I had made to Mr. Scott on his deathbed to look after his wife and not let Lauren take control. But day by day, Mrs. Scott started to become more like Lauren. Her once gentle words turned sharp, and her eyes grew colder. One evening, as I cleaned up after dinner, she snapped at me. "You're just sitting around doing nothing, aren't you?" "I'm doing my best to keep things running smoothly," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite how much her words hurt. "Your best?" She scoffed. "Could have fooled me. Looks like you're just freeloading." She turned her back on me and walked away, leaving me standing there feeling crushed. I was far from a freeloader. I had rented out my apartment and sent nearly all of the income to Mrs. Scott. I was handling most of the housework while Lauren did nothing but criticize. Lauren, living off her mother's pension, was relentless. "What is my brother even seeing in you?" She would taunt me at night, her voice loud enough to echo through the thin walls. I would bite my tongue, swallow my anger and frustration, and remind myself of the promise I had made to Mr. Scott. The atmosphere in the house had become unbearable, filled with tension and hostility. One evening, I came home early from work and overheard a conversation that turned my world upside down. I walked in quietly, unnoticed by Lauren and Mrs. Scott, who were in the middle of a heated discussion in the living room. "We need to get her to sell that apartment of hers. You know how much we could use that money," Lauren said, her voice greedy and calculating. "Yes, but how do we convince her? Laura isn't stupid. She won't just hand it over," Mrs. Scott replied, sounding both frustrated and greedy. "Leave it to me, Mom. I'll sweet-talk her into it. Once she signs it over, we can finally live the way we deserve." Lauren's words slithered through the air like a snake. Hearing them plot to take away my only financial security hit me like a punch to the gut. Fear gripped me. I knew in that moment I couldn't stay any longer. My heart racing, I slipped away to my room unnoticed. They were planning to rob me of everything, and I had to leave before they could succeed. I made up my mind right then and there. Every second in that house now felt like a countdown to disaster. With shaking hands, I quickly packed my essentials. I didn't bother with goodbyes. They didn't deserve them. Slipping out the back door, I ordered a taxi to take me to the train station. As I sat on the train, doubts swirled in my mind. Would Jack understand? Would he take their side? The uncertainty was crushing, but the fear of what might happen if I stayed was worse. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur by, a mix of fear and determination settling in my chest. When I arrived at Jack's place, his reaction was a mix of shock, relief, and concern. His eyes widened as he opened the door, seeing me standing there with a bag in hand, probably looking as frazzled as I felt. "Laura, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I hesitated for a moment, taking in the familiar and comforting sight of his temporary home. "No, Jack, everything's not okay." "Not at all," I replied, my voice trembling. He led me to the couch, his face now full of worry. "Talk to me, babe. What happened?" he urged gently. I told him everything. I explained how things had gotten worse since Lauren came back, how the situation at home had become unbearable, and how they were plotting to manipulate me into selling my apartment. I hadn't wanted to worry him while he was away working, but now there was no hiding it. As I spoke, Jack's face grew darker with every word I said. When I finished, Jack's fists were clenched, and his jaw was tight with anger. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" he asked, his voice full of both concern and frustration. "I didn't want to cause more trouble. I thought I could handle it," I admitted, feeling foolish now. "Laura, damn it. You shouldn't have to handle something like that on your own. He burst out, standing up and pacing the room. I can't believe my mom and Lauren would treat you this way. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes intense. I'm not letting anyone treat my wife like that. No way. Without hesitation, he grabbed his phone. My heart raced as I watched him dial his mother. The phone barely rang twice before she answered. I couldn't hear her side of the conversation, but the way Jack's shoulders tensed told me enough. Mom, this has to stop. I know everything, and I won't tolerate it. If Lauren doesn't leave, and if you don't start treating Laura with respect, we're done. No more help, no more money, nothing. Jack's voice was firm, leaving no room for debate. There was a fiery exchange, and then silence. Jack gripped the phone tightly before speaking again. Fine, if that's your choice, then you've made mine. He hung up and turned to me, his expression softening. Looks like it's just us now, babe, but that's all we need, he said, pulling me into his arms. I leaned into him, feeling safe and supported. Just us, I murmured, feeling the truth in his words. We were on our own now, but somehow that felt okay. Jack and I remained up late discussing everything, including how we would survive without helping his mom and Lauren, how I might set up remote work, and what our future plans would include. With only the two of us, it seemed like we were creating a new existence. We're all in this together, no matter what. It's you and me against the world. Jack grinned resolutely. Right, I said with a smile of my own, feeling more certain having him at my side. The days that followed were hectic. Fortunately, my employer accepted my request to work remotely. We established a little home office in the corner of Jack's living room after he assisted me in moving my belongings out of storage. Although it wasn't flawless, it was ours and tranquil. I felt like a ghost from the past when I got a call about a week into our new routine. Mrs. Scott was the one. Once so pleasant to me, her voice now sounded harsh, desperate, and entitled. Why haven't I gotten the money for this month, Laura? She immediately made a strong accusatory demand. You know we depend on it. Her nerve left me speechless for a time. It was unthinkable. I'm sorry, but after everything, you still expect me to support you. With a tone more shocked than furious, I asked. I could hear Lauren's abrasive, irate voice in the background. She simply lacks gratitude. Make her send the funds. I inhaled deeply to quell the rage that was building within of me. I kept thinking about the hurtful things they had said. Lauren referred to me as a merciless beggar, Mrs. Scott. Recall that I will not send money to anyone who behave in such a manner toward me. I finished. On the other end, there was stillness.